Hello there, I hope you're all healthy and safe. This presentation is for people who'd like to use this time under lockdown to make some music with their computer or tablet. Perhaps you played an instrument as a kid and you've been meaning to get back into it. Or maybe you're a practicing musician and you want to understand how tech can help you. Maybe you're a music student, a teacher or pro, and you're already using a notation program like Sibelius or Finale, but you're wondering what's really going on under the hood. Well, the good news is, if you own a Mac or iPad, you've already got yourself a very fine music app called GarageBand. If you're on a PC, there are great downloadable applications such as Cakewalk and Cubase LE. So there's really nothing to stop you diving in and having fun. And if you don't have a MIDI keyboard around, you can snag yourself one off Amazon for as little as $35. Like anything else, it'll take some practice and experimentation to get really good. Plus, you need to have a basic understanding of how computers think about music. And that's where I come in.
How do computers think about music? Well, 30 years ago, there were synthesizers and drum machines, but they couldn't talk to one another. So if you had, for example, a Yamaha piano and a Roland synthesizer, you couldn't play them together in sync or share data between them. This led to the introduction of a new computer protocol called MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface, and this was adopted by the music industry, leading to a breakthrough in the hardware and software that became available to regular musicians. As personal computers became more common during the course of the 1980s, sequencer packages emerged. These were software programs that allowed you to record, edit, and play back MIDI information, which meant that at home you had some of the cool functions that previously had only been available to professional musicians in expensive recording studios. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, MIDI, and how it relates to the standard Western music notation that we've all grown up with.
At its core, MIDI is a series of coded messages along a timeline. Now, the basic tempo for a MIDI file defaults to 120 beats per minute. But MIDI keeps its own tempo track, so you can vary that as you go along. So I'm going to start by creating some notes as we would recognize them in conventional Western notation and explain how MIDI translates those into a code that can be stored in the computer. Okay, let me just start with a middle C here. Now, as you know, this inherently has no sound to it until we give it an instrument to play back. If I call it piano, then you will at least be able to hear in your head how this should sound. So MIDI takes this note and it records certain parameters of it. The first is the bar number, which is 1. The second is the note itself, which has a note value of 60 for middle C. If it was a C sharp, it would be 61. If it was a D, it would be 62, etc. It has a start time of 1. MIDI by default breaks down a bar into 4 quarter notes of 96 pulses or ticks each. And therefore the beginning of beat 2 would be a start of 97. The duration of our quarter note is therefore 96 pulses or ticks. There are a couple of other parameters that MIDI has to record. One is the velocity of the note, in other words, how hard the note is struck. Well, at the moment, we don't have that information from our notation, but if there were some fortissimo marks over the top, then MIDI records its velocities from values of 1 to 127, and fortissimo would be around about 105. We also need to know the channel on which we want this note transmitted. MIDI has 16 channels. And this enables us to assign different channels to each part, and so that a sequencer or a musical device can sort the channels and distinguish which of the information it cares about and which it wants to ignore. So we're going to assign the piano to channel 1. So we've now completed our first MIDI message. And as I add more notes to the sequence, we're going to add further messages. So let me start by adding a harmony here on an E. Now, everything is the same about that note, except that the note value for this note is now not 60, but 64. Everything else remains the same. So the bar is still 1, the start time is still 1, the duration is 96, velocity is 105, and the channel is still 1. There's our second MIDI message. Now let's put one in further along in the bar. We'll put in this G here. And again, many of the parameters are the same, except that the start time now is 97, and the note value is 67. But the bar is still 1, duration is still 96, velocity is 105, and the channel is 1. That's our third MIDI message. As the file gets more sophisticated, we might add in a second part. So how does this vary? Well, let's stick in a bass note here on a C. And in this case, the bar is still 1. The note value is 12 semitones below the 60, which is 48. The start time is 1. Duration, this time is the entire bar, which is 4 times 96, which is 192, 384 ticks altogether. The velocity, we'll still call that 105. And the channel this time is channel 2, because we're going to assign that to the bass. So you can see now I'm building up this complex MIDI file. And if I play these notes in real time, then these messages will be sent out via a MIDI output to a separate device, or they can be recorded into a MIDI sequencer.
Now, when you record your MIDI notes into a MIDI sequencer, such as GarageBand or Logic, you'll notice that it is able to represent them in conventional notation form. But as a graphic user interface, this is not always the most efficient way to allow you to manipulate the musical notes in all the ways that computers are good at. So what you're more likely to work with in a MIDI sequencer is a view like this. And the advantage of a view like this, where the notes are represented individually with a tail to them, is that it makes it very easy to manipulate them in a variety of different ways. For example, you might decide to change the duration of a note, or transpose a set of notes, or you could cut and paste them somewhere else in the bar, or you could double a note up. And that's what makes MIDI sequencers so neat to work with. You have so many options in terms of the way that you manipulate and modify the notes.
So let's look now at the setup of your studio. Let's suppose that you're recording these MIDI notes into GarageBand or Logic on your laptop. And you have various different instruments in your studio, such as a Yamaha player piano and a Roland synthesizer, and a sampling device, which perhaps has a string library on it. You've recorded into your computer all the MIDI information you want, and that MIDI signal is sent out to all of your instruments via a MIDI cable. And these instruments, if you have a look on the back, have got an input, an output, and very often a MIDI through. So by connecting MIDI cables from one to the other, we'll be sending our MIDI information to all of the instruments in the studio. And because we have configured our Yamaha piano to respond to information on channel 1, it will sort those notes out from the overall stream, and it will play back just the information on channel 1. Similarly, on channel 2, we've got our Roland synthesizer playing a bass part, and on 3, we might have a sampling device playing back strings. Now, each of those instruments is going to output audio into some form of mixer. And from there, we'll output stereo to a pair of speakers. But of course, these days, we've got fabulous personal computers with programs like GarageBand and Logic that have all of these musical instruments contained within the computer itself in the form of plugins and virtual synthesizers. So all of this in the old days, which would have involve multiple different devices spread around your studio, all of this can now be self-contained within your laptop.
So now you have a basic sense of the language that computers use to think about music. I'm going to show you a practical example of how you use a MIDI recording app such as GarageBand to record and edit a piece. Now, if you have GarageBand on an iPad or a Mac, you can stop and start this and do it yourself. If you're using a PC and your plan is to download one of the great free downloadable apps such as Cubase LE or Audacity or Cakewalk, then you can still watch this because the principles are the same, even though some of the commands and functions will be different on your PC. If I take a microphone and stick it up to a grand piano, hit record and play a piece and create waveform on a screen, that's a digital audio recording, not the same as MIDI. Just to remember, in the last lesson, we looked at how a computer thinks of music. When it records MIDI, it records the MIDI data, the note value, the velocity, the duration of the note, those kinds of things. And that data is completely independent from the sound. It's decoupled from the sound. So you could take that same MIDI data and play it back with a different sound altogether, a clarinet, and the notes would remain the same, but the sound would be different. Until you mix down that sequence to a piece of audio, it doesn't really exist as a sound per se. It's still just data. This is good and bad. It's bad because it's not always very faithful to what you played, but it's good because you retain the ultimate flexibility in the musicality and the expression of that music so that you can manipulate it in your computer. Starting from the main desktop on your iPads, you're going to click on the GarageBand icon, which is this guitar here, and you'll probably see this interface. And this will give you a variety of different ways into GarageBand, including all of these cool instruments, which I would encourage you to play with because they're lots of fun. But once you're done with that, we're going to get serious about the MIDI recording in GarageBand. So we're going to use this keyboard here. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, it says Smart Sounds. We're just going to open that up and we'll get an index of different sounds in here. The one we're going to select is the Classical Grand. And that's now going to open us up into one of a couple of different interfaces. You might see this screen here if you've made any previous songs. We're going to create a brand new song using this plus button in the top left-hand corner and say Create New Song. Okay, so we now have a piano icon in the top left-hand corner, and we have a fresh piano track. And I'm also going to open up this little tab here by dragging this window across, which is going to give me a few controls over the piano. If I wanted, I could just start recording MIDI with no regard for the internal tempo setting of GarageBand at all, just by putting it into record and starting to play. The problem with that is that it's going to be very hard to edit because the notes that I'm playing in don't really reflect at all on the internal tempo of GarageBand. So for the sake of today's exercise, I'm going to set the tempo of GarageBand and use a metronome to record with. So in order to set the tempo within GarageBand, you need to know what a couple of these symbols mean. One thing I wanted to point out to you is that in the top right-hand corner is this question mark, which will add tabs for all the different parts of GarageBand, which can be very useful when you're first learning it. But I'm going to open up this second icon from the right, the spanner icon, and that's going to give me access to a range of settings which will help me record my first MIDI piece. So I'm going to set my tempo here to about 120 beats per minute, which will work for now. You can do that by just sliding your finger up and down here. Go back to settings. And also on metronome and count in, I will set the count in to on. I'll have a visual count in, and I'm going to set the metronome sound to a click instead of a wood block, and the metronome level is round about 2/3 or 3/4. It's also going to be important that I make my sequence long enough to cover everything that I do. So if I click on this plus button here, I can see that section A, which I'm going to be recording, is currently set to 8 bars, and I'm going to set that up a lot higher to 120 bars. Well, let's make it 100 bars. So then when I hit the red record button, I'm going to get 4 clicks counting, and I can start recording on the keyboard either straight away, or if I want, I can let a couple of bars go past and just get comfortable with the tempo, and I can always move my notes back in time later. So I'm going to record a little prelude here with the metronome. And I'm going to exaggerate the rubato and the expression a little bit because we can mess with that later on. If I make a few mistakes, that's okay. We can fix the mistakes. So with all apologies to Mr. Bach, here goes. It's okay to ignore the metronome at the end there for the rallentando. There's a couple of mistakes in there, but due to the magic of MIDI, we can go in and fix those in the next segment. But before I finish this segment, I want to do a couple of things. I want to make a backup of this take the way it is, because when I start editing it, if I mess up, I might want to revert to the original recording of it. So in the next segment, we're going to start editing the MIDI, seeing what we can do to improve the sound, changing notes around, transposing, changing the tempo or the durations of the notes, all sorts of goodies you can do thanks to the magic of MIDI. So I now have one complete take of my piece that I like. I don't love it. I like it, and it can be better with a bit of MIDI editing. Now you can either try these same functions with your own recorded piece, or you can just watch this tutorial and then start recording yours later. So here's my complete take of the prelude. Now you may recall that I left a 2-bar gap at the front. So a couple of things. Number one, I don't really need to hear the metronome anymore now that I'm editing. So I'm going to switch that off using this blue metronome icon. I'm also going to slide my entire recording 2 bars earlier by just clicking on it and moving it back to the beginning. Now, navigating around this piece, if I want to begin at the start, there's a couple of ways to do it. One is to hit this rewind button, and the cursor here will move back to the start of the piece. Another is to just take my finger or my Apple Pencil and place it anywhere on the piece that I want to hear it. But for now, I'm going to hit the rewind button and play from the beginning. Now, if I want to zoom in on a particular area of the piece, I can do that using 2 fingers. So I remember there was a mistake round about bar 33. So I'm going to place my cursor there by clicking on this black bar, and then I'm going to zoom into the piece using 2 fingers. And then hit play. Okay, so right there in bar 31, there was a note out of place. We're going to come back to that later and do some editing to fix those errors. Now I'm going to open up the piano roll here, open it up so I can get at the individual notes to edit. And to do that, I'm going to double click on the piano roll, and above the top of it will appear a row of menu items. The one that we're interested in is Edit, so I click on Edit, and now my piano track opens up to occupy the whole of the screen. You want to mess around with the zoom a little bit to get it the way you want it, both vertically and horizontally. And I'm going to play from about bar 29 and just figure out where my bum note is. So I can do that a couple of different ways. I can either just put the cursor there on the black ruler and hit play, or I can do the same thing by just double clicking on the black ruler. Aha, so there is my bum note. It's halfway through bar 31. And I can see that it's the wrong note because over here I've got a piano keyboard that I can play with my finger. And I can see that in bar 31 I played an E when I should have played an F. Very easily fixed. Let's zoom in so we can get a good view of the bad note. Click on it to highlight it and just drag it upwards from an E to an F. Problem solved. Let's just hear how that sounds. Now, if I'd have hit 2 or 3 bad notes, let's say I'd hit 3 bad notes in a row, say I played it like that, and I've got to fix all of these 3 notes together, I can highlight all 3 notes and perform a function on them all together. So to do that, press in the black area to one corner of the section that you want to highlight and just hold your finger down until throbbing underneath it is this highlighted square. And then just drag that square over the region that you want to edit. Now all 3 notes are edited, and that means that when I move them up or down, I'm going to be moving all 3 of them together. And once again, when you see that you have highlighted notes like this, you'll see that you have a different range of menu items over them. One of those functions, for example, is velocity. Now you'll recall when we were talking about the way that computers record MIDI, that they record the velocity, how hard you've hit the note. So let's say, for example, that there is a whole section of the song that you felt was played too loud. Perhaps these D's up here were played too loud. So a very simple solution for that would be to highlight all of them, press on any one of them, go to velocity, and you now have a little slider which will show you how loud they are. And I can move the entire volume of that group down by just changing the volume on the fader here. And when I'm done editing in here, I'm going to hit done and zoom back out to the other view. Now I want to show you something slightly different, which is the duration of the notes. I might decide that this entire song I was really playing too staccato, and a good solution to that might be that I just double click in here, in anywhere in the black, and I see in here I get select all. Click on that and all of the notes in my song are highlighted. At that point I can zoom in to any one of the notes. Let's take one of these ones at the end here. And I can change the duration of the note by just clicking on its tail and moving it in or out. And what I'm now effectively doing is changing the duration of every note in the song. So all I want to do is just make them a little bit longer and more legato like that. And I've now changed the duration of every note in the song, and that means it's going to sound a little different. Now, another thing that you might want to do is try transposing your entire song. So again, with all of the notes highlighted, click on any one of them and move it up or down. And now you get Now, if you screw up at any point, over here there is this sort of backwards button. So when I click on that, it's just going to move me back one step in whatever I did. And if I made 3 mistakes in a row, I can keep going back 3 times to get back to where I was before. So I'm going to hit undo here, and now I have untransposed my tune. And if I hit undo again, I'm going to put the duration back, which is the previous thing that I did. So the duration is now back to where it was before. When I'm done editing here in this editing view, I'll just hit done, and I can go back to the entire piano roll version of my piece. I recorded my Bach piece at 120 beats per minute, but I think that's a little slow. I'm just going to take that tempo up a bit. Your tempo control is over here under the spanner icon, so click on that. And you'll see a tempo in here set to 120. Let's just change that by sliding it up here from 120 to, let's say, 140 beats per minute. Always very flattering to your playing. Let's see how that sounds. What if I want to mess with the ambience or reverberation around my recording? Was it recorded in a room, in a hall, in a church, in a cathedral? Well, we have the ability in GarageBand to change that ambient effect. Over here at the top left is a row of 4 icons. One of them is a sort of a mixer icon with 3 little faders on it. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to open up a range of effects that are going to act on this track here. And down at the bottom it says Master Effects. We're just going to open up that Master Effects, and where it says Reverb, we're going to open up a list of possible reverberation effects in here, like Cathedral or Club or Moon Dome. I'm going to try Cathedral. And the amount of the reverberation is this fader down here at the bottom, Reverb. So I'm going to crank that up just so you can get the full effect of it. So it's pretty, but it's probably a little bit over the top. So let's go with a compromise here. We'll back up to a medium hall and bring down the level of it a little bit. And while I'm at it, I'm actually going to bring down the treble. There's treble and bass controls here. The piano's a little bit bright, so I'm going to bring that down and make it a bit mellower, give it a bit of the large hall reverb effect, and let's see how that sounds. Much more reasonable. I can get rid of this window by clicking on the mixer icon again and get back to my track view. Now, as I've mentioned all along, when you record in MIDI, the MIDI note data is separate from the sound itself. We've been using the classical piano sound, but there's no reason why I can't change that sound to a different piano, or in fact a different instrument altogether, like an organ. To change instruments in GarageBand, double-click on the piano icon over here, and it will pop open this first interface that we saw. I click here on Classical Grand, it'll give me my other options. Not too many options in the organ department, so I'll just try the soul organ, and that's going to pop me open this lovely organ interface here. Let's turn off the chorus, let's mess with the drawbars a little bit, and bit too percussive at the moment, a bit more of this middle stuff, and let's see what we've got. And you can have endless fun with that. To go back to the piano, just click once again on this, click on Classical Grand, click Done, and click on this icon here to get rid of the keyboard, and we're back to our piano again.
I've shown you how to record your first track of MIDI. If you want to record another instrument, let's say you want to overdub a cello on top of the piano, then you just open up a fresh track and go through the same process again while listening to the piano
record your cello. When you're done with all of that, you can mix it down to a single stereo file. I hope this tutorial has been helpful to you and that it will encourage you to dive in and have some fun with MIDI on your computer or tablet.